All right, welcome everyone to Ask HC Alumni, Hacks for Working from Home, a call to figure out strategies for working from home during this national crisis. We'll take your questions and alumni experts will help us discover new ways from working from home effectively. I'm Maura Sweeney, Director of Alumni Career Development at Holy Cross, and I'm happy to welcome you to my home for today's call, offered exclusively for Holy Cross community members. Today, I welcome Debra Doroni from the class of 1989 and Michael Palumbo from the class of 1998. Debra and Michael are both executive and leadership coaches with extensive experience working from home. I'm thrilled to have them join me in answering all of your questions. I myself have lots, so I'm thrilled to be on this call with you. I encourage you to submit questions throughout the presentation by checking out the Q&A function located on your webinar control panel. We'll also use the chat feature, which might show up on your control panel or might show up under the More. I know many of you have great advice to share. We're not the only experts on this call today. And so I encourage you to share your feedback, your experiences, your advice through that chat feature. Please make sure it's directed to everyone so that we can all benefit from that great advice. I'm also going to upload a resource document to the chat, which will be filled with useful links and articles for you to explore. It also includes the contact information for today's speakers, so make sure to download that sometime during the call. I'll send a follow-up email with access to that resource document too. This presentation is recorded and will be made available to all of you in a few days. And with that, I'm very happy to pass things over to Debra Doroni.
Thanks, Maura. Welcome, everyone. I just want to give a big shout out to Dr. Fauci, our fellow Holy Cross alum. I imagine he's probably not here on the call today, probably a little busy, but definitely making me very proud to be a Holy Cross graduate right now. As Maura said, I'm an executive and leadership coach, a former healthcare executive, and I typically work with leaders who are passionate about making a bigger impact, both with their leadership and more broadly in the world, while still trying to have a life outside of work and make sure they take good care of themselves. And I've been leading teams and working remotely since 2007, actually.
Wonderful. And Michael, we're thrilled to have you today too.
Thank you, Maura. Thank you, Debra. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always a warm feeling that comes in being a part of a Holy Cross community, whether you're on campus, on a call, or virtual like this. So it's really a pleasure to be here today. So I'm an executive and leadership coach. I bring heart and soul to leadership in the working world, and I work with rising leaders and executives to bring forward calm, courage, and confidence when it matters most. So before pivoting to full-time coaching, I worked as an IT project manager for 20 years with global projects, global teams. So I've worked in office, I've worked at home, I've worked overnight, I've worked when it's daytime for someone and nighttime for everyone else. So happy to share some experience and looking forward to hearing from all of you and having a great conversation today.
Fantastic. Thank you both. And I thank everyone, for joining us, and you've submitted a lot of great questions around this topic, and we're going to dig into those. But I just wanted to get started with some of the most common tips that I've found through all of the articles and webinars and videos that have been passed around, the memes that I'm sure we're all enjoying right now. But these are some of the most common tips that I find consistently over and over and over again. Get dressed being a pretty big one, particularly now that we're all on video all the time. Create a dedicated workspace, establish a routine as much as that's possible, set realistic goals focused on outcomes, and communicate clearly and often with your team. So these, I'm sure, will come up through some of the different scenarios that we've talked about. As we all know, working from home right now is very different than working from home under normal circumstances. But this is just a way to kind of set the ground rules of what a lot of the experts say are some key tips. So with that, we will jump into the first of 3 case studies that we'll walk through to help guide the first part of our conversation, and then we'll open it up to questions from all of you. So case study number 1, working from home with children. I am guilty of this. And so I look forward to the advice that our alumni have to share. So dear Holy Cross alumni, I am a program manager and parent of 3 children, 1 in 9th grade, 1 in 6th grade, and 1 in kindergarten. I typically work in the office, but my entire company switched to remote work 2 weeks ago. My partner's company went remote, and the schools closed and transitioned to distance learning at that time too. I love my family dearly, but I'm beginning to lose my mind. Help! Not only do I have to transition to working from home, but I'm also transitioning to working while parenting and teaching my children. I have never nagged more in my life. Also guilty, letter writer. So Michael has agreed to take point on this question. So, you know, I guess, Michael, if you could talk to us a little bit about your scenario working from home right now, right before we dive into some of these questions.
Sure, absolutely. So I resonate with a lot of the themes in this and the situation. So my wife is now working full-time from home as well. And we have, our son is 2 years and 4 months. So I'm full-time coach, part-time preschool dad, art coordinator of activities, and my wife and I juggle who's got the laptop and who needs this room for that. And we're in New York City. So we have a 2-bedroom apartment. So we're juggling where our computer is out in the living room and our laptop is in one of the bedrooms. And so who's got what call and who needs the silence and who can cover. So we're in the middle of all that juggling. So that's our situation. That's my day-to-day. And that's why I was happy to jump in and tackle this one.
Yes, and thank you very much. I should say I'm in the suburbs between Boston and Worcester with 2 kids, and thankfully my husband's home. But you might hear kids and dogs in the background, everyone.
Yeah.
So for the first question, you know, in this situation, how do I keep my children motivated while also showing that I'm committed to producing great work for my company? I know this is a worry for a lot of people. It's a worry for me.
Yes. So I'm going to jump in. I'm going to answer all the questions, but there are 2 themes in here that I just want to talk about briefly first.
Yeah.
One is mindset, and the second is communication. So I just posted a quick question in the chat room. So what is your mindset? What is your frame of reference, your approach to working through this type of challenge, working from home and doing the juggling with family and kids and demands in the office? So just go ahead and put in the chat room. Just make sure you've got the filter to all panelists and attendees so everyone can see it. And you can go ahead and just throw in a couple of words about what's your frame of reference or what's your approach to how you might tackle this challenge. Flexibility. That is important. Taking it day by day, absolutely. Challenge, planning. Yep, is absolutely challenging. There's a lot of planning. Outcomes, gratitude is wonderful. Priorities, balance, great. My talk is covered. Everyone's got it down already. So I love the responses. So I'll dive in a little bit around mindset, communication, get back to the questions, and I'll do this briefly because I know there's a couple of case studies here. So within mindset, 2 key points. One is acceptance. And it's acceptance that you cannot parent, you cannot be a teacher, and you cannot work as an employee or contractor 100% all the time at the same time. And embracing that and accepting that there are different roles here and you've got to pick your spots and prioritize, that will bring the stress level and the whirling and the overwhelm, that will bring it down.
Yeah.
Embracing the pain is in the resistance to that acceptance. If you can surrender to it and say, this is the best I can do in this moment, in this hour, in this block of time, and focus on where you are, things will slow down and you'll actually be more productive. The second thing is embracing a growth mindset of learning. There are no rights and wrongs. There is no script for something of this global nature. what works today might be different tomorrow, and that's okay. So if you can embrace hey, let's try something and see how it goes and then adjust, that ties in with flexibility, balance, and a lot of the themes that we saw come up in the chat room. So those are the two things, the mindset of acceptance and then embracing the growth. The second is communication. So my wife and I are checking in sometimes hourly through the day. We have a plan in the beginning of the day, and we've got things that change as we go. Meetings change, things pop up, things get canceled. So is it a good time to check in? Is a great question when you're working and sharing space with other people, just to say, you might be mid-thought or but check in and adjust.
Yeah.
So that's where the mindset and communication are the two big themes that popped up in 3D for me with this case study.
Yeah.
So drawing on that, how do I keep my children motivated? So if you can, as a family unit, whatever that is for you in your home, embrace that growth and learning mindset, bring the children to the table and figure it out together. So engage them, say, okay, what's going on tomorrow? When are your classes? Here's when one parent or partner is available. Here's when the other one is out of pocket. How are we going to set this up? Who's going to work where? Who's got what machine? What do you need when? When do we want to eat? When are we having lunch?
Right.
And I think if you can engage your children in that conversation, now the kindergartner versus the ninth grader, your responses may be very different, and what you ask of them may be different. But if they're part of the conversation and part of creating how this is going to work, they'll stay motivated with the activity and how you're working together.
Yeah. I must say one thing, it's very different, but I have a 1.5-year-old who now has a Zoom call with her preschool class, her toddler class every week. My older daughter, who's 4.5, has a call twice a week with her preschool class. And I've had to build that into our calendar to make sure it's the only time during the week they get really any structure. So I want to dedicate that to them. But it's interesting to have to, like you're saying, juggle that, build it in. But it also made me laugh that, we set up the iPad for her Zoom call, and she runs over and grabs my wireless mouse because she sees her mom using a wireless mouse all the time, and she's got her call, so she has to use that too.
Right. We have a dedicated little dilapidated iPad keyboard that's missing keys that my son is now all over, and it's his. He asked for Michael's keyboard, so it's go with it.
Yes, and I love that. Just bringing them into the fold as a way to help. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be seamless, but to help.
Yes.
Right. And so, Debra, I certainly want you to jump into this conversation too. As you're hearing things and have some thoughts to share.
Well, I come from a slightly different perspective in that I have a 26-year-old stepdaughter, and one of the challenges has been to say, stay away. Can I come over and use the gym in the basement? No, sorry.
Yes,
that's been really hard.
Right. It's true. I think no one is gets to escape difficulty in this situation. I get another question, that came up is about limiting distractions, because, and it kind of ties into that first question too. You want to show that you're producing great work, but you also, it can be kind of hard to focus when you have those distractions. What are some thoughts that come to mind? I think checking in on every hour and constantly balancing is a great suggestion.
So I think in terms of limiting the distractions, that also comes into a mindset that if you have the expectation that there are not going to be any distractions, then you're setting yourself up to have a lot of difficulty in the environment that we're all in right now.
Yep.
So if there's a way to lean into that, and that may mean you're taking a phone call and you've got, the smallest of your children that needs the most attention on your lap for the call, but you're able to get things done and also meet the needs as a parent, which will always come first, is that, taking care of yourself, taking care of your family is always going to be the priority. And then how do you demonstrate that you're committed to producing great work for your company? That comes down to, with the pockets of time that you have, you've got to prioritize and deliver on what is most important. And don't fall into the busy work trap. It may feel great, like you've got control, that, oh, I cleaned out my inbox, but now you're a half day behind on a key deliverable that's due tomorrow at noon. So filter your inbox for anything you need to get that most important deliverable done, and go do it. And at some point, you're going to have to let go of the smaller things and the busy work and the communication. Just as you're communicating and checking in at home with your partner, check in with your team, and we'll talk more about teams later, but check in with your manager or what is most important, because what was top of the, the food chain 3 weeks ago is completely different now for many companies that are dealing with this. So knowing what's most important to your company, to your management, and what you need to deliver, go after that first.
Yeah.
Maura, I saw a great tip somewhere yesterday, which I would never have thought of, especially if you have little children, put a different color sweater on. The red sweater is when I can't be disturbed, right? And so that there's a visual to let them know that this is a sacred time.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, because we were laughing yesterday that for our 4.5-year-old, we say, okay, I just need 2 minutes, just be quiet for 2 minutes. And in her mind, 2 minutes lasts about 3 seconds. So I love that visual cue, as long as this is on. Yes, hopefully that'll help it sink in. I love that. Thank you. Well, and the third question, which I think this is going to be true for everyone, whether they have kids or not, is how do I avoid the 12-hour work days when I have to get up before my kids, or just, are at home at your computer all day long in order to focus? Any advice there?
Yeah, so on this one, you've got a clear start to the day.
Yep.
You have set a time when you are starting. Your alarm goes off and you're up and you're going. That book, how many books can you fit in a bookshelf? There's so many. So you need to bookend the back end of it. And you need to set a stopping time for yourself, just as you set a start. Sleep, you read it all over the place, that sleep and self-care are paramount. Without sleep and without time to disconnect and decompress, your immune system can take a hit, and this is the wrong time to put yourself at risk. So just as you set an alarm to start your day, set one to stop and prioritize in between.
I think that's great. That's great. Do you have any other tips, Deb?
No, that's exactly right. And I think, much of what we're talking about here applies even when you're not working remotely, and maybe even especially then when it's not a pandemic situation. There's always a temptation to do work when you get home and just check those emails, and you're not giving your brain a chance to reboot when you do that.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
I agree 100%. Yeah.
And one thing that I found that I've had to do, since I skew on the early end, but have to take a break midday to really give my husband a chance to do some work so I can focus on the kids, is I have my own private log. I feel like I'm a consultant or a lawyer billing my hours, but I've been tracking all of the hours so that I feel better about myself when I get to that end point that you describe. So I can look and see, okay, have I put in a full day's work? Can I see the chunks of hours where I have worked and have really focused? And for me, it at least makes me feel better about being able to turn off, because life is so hectic and just the schedule is so odd, that it can show me visibly that I actually, no, you've done the work. You can take a break now. It's okay.
Yeah. And I think there are a lot of opportunities for that something that we've experienced at home is that there have been weekdays where as a family, we have 3 meals together. And unless we're sometimes on vacation, one of us is sleeping in if we have a chance, and we'll go through the rotation. But now it's different with nobody commuting and everybody here, and we're doing our own childcare. So can you find the opportunities that this presents? So are they distraction? This goes back to mindset. How do I limit distractions? But if you're focusing on the distractions, your mindset is missing the perspective of the opportunities that this presents as well to come together.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's wonderful. And that's a great way to move on to the second case study.
But Maura, I just want to say that was fantastic that you came up with something that works for you. You know what, you know, helps you feel comfortable, and you found a tool that supports that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's true. I mean, it's going to be different for everyone, which is also, you know, why I want to make sure that people have with the, you know, in the chat, be sure to type in, you know, what you have found that's worked for you so that we can learn from one another. Thank you. All right. Case study number 2. And Debra has agreed to take the lead on this one about maintaining productivity at home. So dear HC alumni, I am a communications professional for a financial services organization. We transitioned to remote work a week ago. While the company is equipped with the technology to work from home, the culture is to work from the office. This is the first time that a critical mass is working remotely, and it's proving to be a real challenge. I want to use this as an opportunity to show my boss and my team that I am just as productive as when I'm in the office. Is this possible? Or am I fooling myself? What are your initial thoughts on this one, Debra?
So I agree 100% with Michael that it really is all about mindset, you know, and being intentional. I think the 2 questions that are here, we've sort of already answered already around, you know, managing family and work responsibilities while you're home. I think, you know, it comes down to how to build a daily schedule, for example. That's really going to depend. Maura, you alluded to it. You said, I'm a morning person, right? Know what's best for you. When do you work best? Do you work best in short bursts of time with little breaks in between? Do you work better to have a big chunk and heads down for that time and come back up? You know, being really intentional and just asking yourself those questions before you sort of dive in and look for a solution. We did include in the resources some apps and time management tools that can be helpful, but it's not one size fits all. You really have to know, you know, what's most helpful for you. You know, we talked about creating rules of engagement. I would say be upfront with both yourself and your boss and your team about what's possible. We all have different responsibilities. You know, someone like me, not having children at home is going to be a different set of challenges than, you know, I'm dealing with adult parents in different states, right? But that's a different set of challenges than, you know, Maura, you with 2 little ones running around. Right. So I think creating those rules of engagement with your team, your boss, yourself, what do you expect from yourself? Yeah. Setting a schedule, as we talked about, building in some time for renewal during the day, whatever that is for you, you know, whether it's and again, these are things that work, whether you're working from home and perhaps sometimes even more importantly, when you're working in the office. Right. Right. You know, if it's taking a quick walk around the house or just reading something not work related, meditating, taking a quick nap, which may or may not be possible depending on what your home circumstances are like, but building that mental renewal in, something that hits the reboot button. Right. I've seen these great comments coming through in the chat, you know, being flexible and realistic. You cannot, as Michael said, expect to be able to manage in a pandemic situation the way you would normally. And as I mentioned, my background is in healthcare, and this is a place where we can take a page out of the healthcare book. They have set aside everything that is normal and are working 100% around the clock around this pandemic. They've, you know, stopped doing elective types of procedures and visits. They've started delivering them in different ways. They've really created a whole new normal and created new sets of expectations from their patients who are their customers, from their teams. And I think that's something that's necessary to do in your work no matter what type of work that is right now.
Right.
So be realistic about whether you can, in fact, expect to be as productive. A
Right.
great tip I heard, and we included this resource from the Bridging Distance organization, was to focus on outcomes, not hours, right? What is it that you want to have happen? Does it matter if you spend 2 hours towards that or 4 hours towards that, you know, and as a leader, especially being clear about that with your team. What are the outcomes you want to see from this? Not worrying about whether everybody's punching in and punching out, you know, at a particular time.
Well, because I imagine that that's just incredibly freeing for a lot of people. Thinking
Absolutely.
that, I mean, at different days, you get into a flow and you can bang something out and produce really great quality work in a short amount of time. And other days you're just not feeling it and it can take forever. But how nice to actually be in a situation where you could be rewarded for having those kind of moments of mental clarity.
Yeah. And as Michael said, being communicative and open, and I would emphasize that includes with dealing with emotions around all of this.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the most important things, I think the fourth point I would make is being compassionate to your team and to yourself, right?
Yeah.
Don't set expectations, as Michael said, that are unrealistic. Be realistic and recognize that this is a different kind of normal. The more that we try to pretend that this is normal, you're kind of stuffing down emotions that, you know, ultimately are going to play out somewhere else, whether that's a physical response or tensions in the team or tensions in the family. So being really communicative and acknowledging, and happy to share some particular tips around that if that's useful, but I think just kind of thinking in that kind of a framework is very helpful.
Michael, what jumps to mind as you're hearing all of this?
I think there was a great comment in the chat about honesty. That goes along with compassion and integrity. I think that is, Deb, I think you really touched on it. That's at the core. You got to be honest with yourself about what you can and cannot do, and be okay with that yourself, and be communicative with your teams. It's going to be impossible to avoid distractions. One thing that I do, if I know I'm, you know, watching my son for the next 90 minutes and my head is drifting, if it's a note in the phone or a Post-it note or something, it's like, what can I do right now to help me be in the moment? And sometimes it's taking 30 seconds and writing down what it is my mind is going to. And once it's out and I have something to come back to, it helps me be where I'm at in that moment.
Well, that reminds me, because I should have mentioned this to people at the beginning, but I've had the pleasure of doing a webinar with both of you in the past that everyone can find in the archives on the Alumni Career Development website. And that reminds me of something I think you said last summer during your webinar, Debra, or at least I've always credited it to you, about how writing down your thoughts and journaling actually does trigger something neurologically, and it does help it get out of your body.
Yes, you actually use brain space trying to keep track of something, even if it's not totally on your consciousness too. And that's why sometimes just free form journaling is helpful, because you free up your brain to be more present.
Yes. Yeah, wonderful. Oh, good. So I'm glad that I was giving you credit where credit was due.
Yeah, I'm the neuroscience geek.
Yeah. Well, and Michael, I just think that's so perfect, because it does. You acknowledge what you're worried about or what is on your mind, but you can also let it go a little bit, which is what we're really, really looking to do. All right, so let's jump in. We've got one more case study before we open it up to questions that you can all submit in the Q&A feature. So for the third case study, we'll approach this as a team about managing virtual teams. How appropriate. So dear HC alumni, I lead a cross-functional team of 16 people, which supports internal operations for a large insurance company. We were asked to begin to work remotely 3 weeks ago. We are each used to working remotely from time to time, but never all of us on a full-time basis. I'm used to having regular FaceTime with colleagues, my direct reports, my colleagues, and my boss. Image and professionalism matters a lot in our culture. There are a lot of skeptics who don't believe in working from home and think that it's permission for people to get paid to lounge around or do their housework. It's a big challenge. How do I combat this opinion and protect my team, knowing that I can't single-handedly change a company's culture? And what is the best way to manage colleagues' perceptions of your presence and engagement when they can't see you?
Maura, that one just got my dander up a little bit, because when I first started working from home way back in 2007, I was doing it 2 days a week, and it was in a culture that was totally not at all around virtual. And I actually had the head of human resources tell me that if I wanted to move up in the organization, I would have to be, quote, full-time. And I was probably working 60 hours a week from home at that time. So I appreciate that not all cultures respect that. I hope that's changing. And in fact, I'm really hoping that that's one of the things that comes out of this horrible pandemic, is that companies will get more comfortable, because there's tons of research around how this shows that it not only increases productivity, but it increases engagement. It makes people feel trusted. I saw folks mentioning honesty and trust in the chat box. It's freeing. I know for me, it was interesting as a leader. It allowed me I had to let go of certain things because I wasn't physically there for somebody to drop by. And in many ways, it allowed other people to step up. And so it really, I think I, in some ways, maybe did my team a service by not being there, because they learned and they figured things out for themselves. So, and just from an economic standpoint, how much space you could do away with if you didn't need offices. Where I worked, everybody had their own office, and 80% of the time they were vacant because people were somewhere else in a physical meeting. The money saved on commuting, I commuted 5 hours a day for 7 years, which is why I got to work from home a couple of days a week. But what a waste, right? And the cost of all that, I was a much better employee not to have to do that commute 2 days a week, right? So I just think there's so much opportunity, and I'm hoping that's part of what comes out of all of this. I also, then I'll shut up and let Michael chime in here, but I want to challenge the I can't single-handedly change a company's culture. You can lead from wherever you are, no matter what your job is. Leadership is not a title. And so if you can embrace the underlying behaviors that go behind this, that we've been talking about, mindset and trust and honesty and transparency and communication, you can start to shift that culture, no matter what your role is.
Yeah. So I think there's the thread of leadership in here is, in terms of managing a team, the 16 people will need 16 different things on 16 different days. And that's true on most normal days in an office, but in this environment, that's going to be heightened. So consistently checking in with people, even if it's just for a couple of minutes, and not to make sure that they're online and working, but the compassion that came up earlier that Devin mentioned was, see how they're doing, checking in, what's going on, is everybody healthy, what are they worried about? And then with that, what you have as a team will be different, and how you pull them together will be different. Know who your night owls are and shift them to work later, and know who your early birds are and let them get a jump on things, and work out the handoffs and transitions in between. And yes, I agree, Deb, leadership is all over the place. It's not just a title and a position. And there are servant leaders that within the team of 16, there's a lot of leadership opportunities of helping to bring the rest of the team up with you. But in terms of how do you combat and protect your team against that perception that you can't, that working from home is fluff, deliver the heck out of the most important stuff and say, here are the results. Now, how you get there is going to be different because of the intangibles now, but and that's where, if you're the team leader in this example, going back and knowing what is highest priority and making sure that gets done, and making sure that the people on your team know, focus on this and let this go. So you can come back and say, we did the three most important things and we did them well. Here are the results.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because I know as you were talking, there were certain people who come to mind to me who are very good about creating boundaries and, doing and prioritizing and getting the work done in a way that's very appropriate and professional, while also at least giving the appearance of kind of, carving out time for themselves and, making time for breaks. And I don't look at those people and think, oh, they're really slacking off. I respect them so much because they've shown that they're willing to make a stand and to put some boundaries and some limits around what they will do, what they won't do in any certain time. But I do think that it's important for everyone to think about, within your culture, who are the people that you respect, that a lot of people respect. My guess is that they're not the workaholics who are driving everyone crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mara, I'm glad you brought that up, because what you're really talking about is people who live by their values.
Yeah.
Right. And Michael, you said it earlier too. You said, you alluded to one of your values is family first. Right. And so, being really intentional, it goes back to where we started this, being really intentional. What's most important to me, and how do I build my day? How do I communicate with my team? How do I interact with my employer in a way that's consistent with what those values are?
Yeah. And I think from a diversity and inclusion perspective, there's an element to this that there are some potential blind spots in here in managing a team like this remotely that I think it's important to bring to light. So within the 16 people in the team, wherever they may be, from an economic standpoint, people may be in very different positions. Yep. And when it comes to video, I know a lot of companies are moving towards a video forward culture. Some people's homes are modest and they don't want video. Mm-hmm. Some different cultures may have 3 generations and extended families under one roof, and it's just crowded and it's difficult, and people are converting closets into workspaces. Mm-hmm. So if someone is not open to video or needs to juggle and there's a little background noise, this is where, from a diversity perspective, you need to the compassion comes in and the flexibility comes in. And even there may not be enough devices and internet bandwidth at home for 3 or 4 children that are now doing homeschooling with 1 or 2 working parents or partners, and some there are a lot of single parent households out there where someone's got to put a red cape on every day and just make magic happen out of the impossible. So just be mindful in this that they're, from a diversity and inclusion perspective, be open-minded and be careful what your assumptions are about what's happening on the other end.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is really important to bring in that sense of communication and honesty. Again, this is not really a time when anyone should put on a face and pretend that things are fine, because we all know they're not fine. So it almost gives us the permission to be a little bit more authentic, to show your true self, and to realize that people are going to believe in you. I've seen in a few different places an Ernest Hemingway quote that I don't have it memorized, but it says something along the lines of, the best way to learn how to trust people is to trust them. Yeah. And you just have to try and accept that, when given the different criteria and the goalposts, that they'll find a way to do it. And one question, oh, sorry, Debra, go ahead.
I'd add too, that if you feel like you can't trust people, if you're a leader and you feel like you can't trust people, you maybe have the wrong people on the bus.
Yeah.
And you're not hiring for the values of your company. You're not creating an environment that leads to trust. Someone put a note in the chat box about reporting up when HR is asking for proof. That's a little disappointing that that's the culture, that there's a lack of trust there.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because that's actually what I was going to ask next. I saw that question come up, and you know, I guess what tips would you have, knowing that if that is the reality, that HR is saying, look, you've got to report up, you have to justify everyone's hours. What can people do?
Well, I think you need to ask specifically. Here's a great way of developing the rules of the road. What does HR want? Are they asking for people's hours? Are they just asking for you to give some evidence that you're keeping track of things? What is it that they need? I might even, this might be where you can lead from below in a way. I might flip it back and say, gee, what is it you're concerned about? What is it that you need? Why do you need this? You know, and it's possible that that need might go away. But on the other hand, I think, you know, going back to that measuring outcomes, you know, ask HR, what is the outcome you need, or establishing it for yourself. Here's the outcome I expect from my team, and here's how I'm making sure that that's the outcome they're producing, and here you go, HR. Yeah.
And I think another thing too is, I agree, is that what's driving the need to report up? What's driving the validation? Where is it going? So if you can see the bigger picture, then that will help you organize yourself and organize your team. And the other thing I would do, I'd say, once you have that conversation about what the expectations are and why, then it's, okay, in order to meet this, here is what my team needs in support from you and from the organization. We need this tool, we need more equipment for people at home. Can we cover people to get high-speed internet? How do we support the people that we have to boost the productivity and get the results you want? So there's an opportunity here for companies and employers to turn inward and support the people that are now working remotely as well.
Right. Wonderful. Well, and with that, you know, we'll jump in. We've got a few, about 15 minutes left to take your questions that have come in. I have some that came in from registration, but there's one that came in live that I'll go to first. They said, when it comes to diversity, do you think that there is a difference that has to do with generation and how people approach work from home? And have you gotten a feel for if one generation might be having a harder or easier time, or maybe, you know, just from your experiences, seeing some of the differences, that some of the stereotypical differences that the generations might have?
So I tend to try to avoid stereotypes.
Yeah.
For example, I have a professor who's in her 70s, and she was a pioneer in online education. So I think, you know, those who are a little bit more comfortable with technology, maybe having an easier time. Those who are more comfortable with distraction and people around them, and, you know, get their energy from having people around them, maybe more comfortable with everybody being at home. If you're more of an introvert and you need some me time, it may be harder. So I want to stay away from saying one generation does this and another generation does that. I think we all have our strengths and needs, and you know, looking at individual situations and how do we honor those.
Yeah, I think the introvert extrovert is important, that people who really crave connection and it feeds them. Those are the people that are going to look to go video first and look to really make connections. And someone who's very introverted is not going to feel comfortable here for 45 minutes one-on-one, right? But from a generational perspective, I think, Deb, you touched on it with comfort with technology, is that comfort with technology is great, but that if you end up, oh, let me check this email, and then it's Facebook, and then it's Twitter, it's this, and then 45 minutes are gone. And so the technology itself can create distraction. So it comes back to the structure and routine and prioritizing and sticking to it.
Yeah, great. One question that came in, which I really love, is this person would love to hear people's favorite benefit that they discovered from working from home. I think there's so much of a focus on, okay, these are the problems that we're trying to solve. But, and this is, you know, for both of you, but also for everyone in the chat, what has been an unexpected benefit that you found from this time?
Oh, for me, it was freedom.
Yeah.
Not just now when I started doing this before, just I, you know, gained 5 hours a day in my life every day.
Yeah.
And I work predominantly from home as a coach most of the time now. And I think it allows my coachees to have a lot of freedom because we don't have to worry about trying to find a place to meet that's quiet and private. We can, you know, I'm at home and they can be wherever they need to be to get the privacy they need. So I think it's wonderful. And I get to freedom and flexibility. So, you know, Michael described, I think, having 90 minutes with his son, right? That's 90 minutes that if he were going to an office normally, he wouldn't be able to do. So that flexibility to work around it, I think, for me, the remote situation was hands down such a satisfier and probably kept me at my company an extra 10 years.
Oh, wow. That's significant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think for me, specific to this situation that we're in right now, because I've been working from home full time for almost a year with the coaching side of the business, but specifically now in the last 2 to 3 weeks, all childcare arrangements have been thrown out the window. There's no daycare, there's no nursery school, there's no drop-off program, there's no help from grandparents coming in, but it's us. So what it's created for me is more time with my son. And it's an article that I'm writing, I'm publishing early next week is about that exactly. The time that I've had with him and just what this looks like for me is that's been so much fun, and what it looks like from I run a preschool basically from 9 to 11 a lot of days. So
yeah.
All right, and I'm going to bring in another chair here, and going with that experimental mindset here. Here is our family unit.
Oh,
Here
wonderful.
And he's wearing the colors.
So this is our son, Michael Patrick. And in
Hi,
his
Michael.
barely fitting Holy Cross t-shirt. See, that's Laura, and that's Deb, and there's lots of our friends from Holy Cross. So yeah, time with this little guy, and we're going to see how curly his hair gets over the next however many weeks until everything opens up. And this is my wife, Andrea, who's also Holy Cross. So
hi there.
Welcome, Andrea.
Yeah, I've been watching in the other room. The great webinar.
And it's true. I mean, how perfect. You know, when else at work do you get to have these kinds of moments? And I think, you know, that for me has been one of my favorite things, is getting to see a different side of my colleagues. And I mean, we're very open in the alumni office, and we're really great friends in addition to being colleagues. But even still, I mean, when you're welcomed into people's homes in this way, you get to see a different side. And for those people who, you know, haven't necessarily had that kind of authenticity with their colleagues, hopefully they're starting to feel that same thing.
And Maura, you're touching on that kind of authenticity is what leads to transformation.
maybe the
That changed the world.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. There's that experiment and growth mindset. What did we learn from this? So we never let him in when I've got the studio up. So this was a treat. Go ahead, Deb.
And that's so many people's reality. Thank you, Michael. Oh, go ahead, Debra. I know you had a thought there.
Well, I was saying you talked about authenticity, and really there's tons of research around this as well, that leaders and people who bring their whole self to work, that creates a trusting environment. It creates a safe environment. It creates more engagement, more productivity, and the research shows better results, economic results, you know, whatever the results are that you're trying to measure for your particular company. And so that's, again, sort of the silver lining I hope comes out of this as well, is some of that authenticity, that people will feel more comfortable admitting that they're a whole person.
Yes. Yes, because we all are, whether you admit it or not.
I heard a great expression this morning: when you take one step forward, you bring the rest of your body with you, right? And so you can bring an employee to work, but they bring the rest of themselves with them.
Yeah. Well, and there have been so many great comments that are coming in too about other, other benefits that people have had. So I hope everyone else is also following the chat. More time together as a family, more time to exercise, a lot more, more time to read. So I think it's just been so difficult, especially transitioning and setting up an initial, routine. But there are a lot of positives. So I'm really glad to see that a lot of that is coming through. Another question that came up, let's see, I guess, are there certain different websites or tools that you like to use, knowing that, technology changes so quickly, but there have been a few questions that came in about, best resources for one-on-one meetings, best way to share files, different technologies that are useful. I think it's one thing when your institution has its own preferred technologies, but if you're working with clients who use something else, or working across industries, business to business, different people are working on different platforms. Do you have any experience with that, just from your current work or past work, and any advice that you can share on that?
Yeah, so I've been sort of forced to, and we didn't have PCs when I was at Holy Cross. So just to give you an example of a technology dinosaur, I've been forced to practice with a bunch of different technologies based on whoever the client is I'm working with sometimes. And I actually have found I like Zoom the best. It has the most flexibility. It's the most reliable. You can break people out into breakout rooms. So you can have a group meeting and then have teams go off and work separately and come back together. There's the Q&A, the chat. You can set it up in different ways, automatically requiring video, not requiring video, putting in a backdrop. My personal favorite is touch up your appearance. I like that one. And so I have found that to be the most, when you send an invite to someone else, all they have to do is click on it and it downloads. You can use it on phone, computer, tablet. To me, it is the most versatile, and it's not always asking me to do weird updates. That stuff all happens in the background. Like for someone who's not particularly technology savvy, it has been the most versatile and the most user-friendly I've encountered. Great.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite, Michael?
Yeah, Zoom is the favorite from a business and work perspective, and I'm seeing that it's so widely used that the laws are being temporarily relaxed for therapists. It's more important to provide the service, because there are different levels of Zoom, and they do have a HIPAA compliant version of Zoom, but they are relaxing the requirement that they're allowing therapists to use non-HIPAA compliant versions of Zoom in this crisis, because it's more important for people to get support. So I, from a business perspective, I like Zoom, but if your company is on Skype for Business, or you're using Microsoft Teams, or you're using Google Meet and stuff like that, then go with the flow with where your company is. But if you're independent or looking for something, I would look at Zoom first.
Great.
Another good thing about Zoom is you can minimize yourself, so you don't have to look at yourself while you're looking at the other person. And I think not all technologies allow that.
Yeah.
And they have done, as Michael pointed out, they've done a nice job. They've made Zoom available to schools and families for free. The pro levels, you can get a free account anyway, but with the expanded features. So as a company, they've really stepped up and been supportive of community during this situation.
Yeah. Well, and since you're all joining me on Zoom, I'll say that I've had a really great experience transitioning over to Zoom. And I used the breakout rooms, like you mentioned, Debra, the other day when I did a virtual workshop for our alumni. And the magical thing about breakout rooms is that, you send people into their room and they are off in their private video chat room. And then when you tell them to come back to the big group, they automatically come back. So unlike an in-person session where you have to, keep reminding people, stop talking, please focus up here. Everyone is forced to focus because the technology does it for you. That was an unexpected benefit.
I see one in the chat. There's another Basecamp. I'm not familiar with the tool. It's one I haven't used, but I have used Asana, which is good for project management, software development, more creative-based projects. And I've also used, drawing a blank on it now, but we use it all the time. Jira, if you're doing software development, which helps with just global teams in general, and technology specific and software development who are really working on creative processes and iterative cycles of let's create something, deploy it, learn, and just doing that in short sprints. So
great, wonderful. And one more question before we reach the hour mark. Do you recommend any tools for virtual checklists or calendars?
Personally, I use G-Tasks. I love that. And it integrates with other apps. I am able to import things into it pretty easily from reminders and other stuff. I actually don't know if they're going to continue to support it. I think they may have something more recent out, but that's my personal favorite.
Great, thank you.
I go through cycles of different tools. I've set up Jira boards for myself where different color Post-it, and there are tools that you can do this as well online, but for me, I think best pen to paper first. So I will set up different Post-it notes for different types of activities and focus. And here's a column of what I'm doing today and move things over. And by the end of the week, when you've got 25 little notes done, then you can go ahead and do that. But there are personal Jira boards that you can create out there that are good. But if you're on the go, sometimes just, the reminders list in the phone that's uploaded to a cloud so that you're thinking of something at night and you can, whatever machine you're working on, you can access that list. So that's where something cloud-based is going to be helpful, just so you can pick it up as you're flexing through your location and devices.
Great, wonderful. Yeah, I know in my Google Calendar, in addition to my fancy to-do list, my to-do notebook, the only way I could stay organized.
Whatever you're going to go back to, right? Whatever's going to allow you to be the most, meet your needs the best, whether that's flexibility or consistency. It's really about training yourself to use whatever the tool is more important than the tool.
Right. Well, and with that, I know we're reaching the hour mark, and a few people have already told us they had to leave, and we're just so grateful that you all joined us today and shared your advice. Michael and Debra, this has been a really, really fun experiment that I'm thrilled that you've been on board for. So thank you so much for sharing your advice with us today. For anyone who missed the beginning, this has been recorded, and so we'll share this with everyone. I also have a survey that I'll be sending out. This is the first time we've done a session like this, so I welcome your feedback and suggestions for topics and for other speakers. I also want to let you know that I will be sending out the resource document that we referenced, so you'll get access to that. And we have another session coming up next week that I hope you'll register for. It's next Wednesday at 2 p.m. With alumna Kelly Meerbot from the class of 98 and Joe Morgan from the class of 81. They'll be fielding questions about channeling your inner leader in order to navigate our current process, our current circumstance. So I hope you'll join us for that. With that, again, I want to thank Michael and Debra and all of you for joining us today from wherever you are. It's always really wonderful to connect with the Holy Cross community. So thank you very much. Stay safe and stay healthy, everyone.
Thank you, Mara. And I think I speak for both Michael and I hope I do. We're available, right? We did this because what blows my hair back is supporting other people. So much so that I left an entire career to dedicate myself to that. So if we can be of any help, you'll have our contact information. Both of us do complimentary coaching sessions. So please don't hesitate to reach out to either one of us if we can help or support you or answer questions now or in the future. when this
Yeah,
is
this
all
is
over and we're back out in the world.
exactly. Deborah, I echo that. This is one of the communities I turn towards first to provide support and to get support from, and in these challenging times. So, yeah, there's plenty of open space. Deborah and I are both available, so please do reach out.
Thank you both. Your generosity is really wonderful, and it's a pleasure anytime I get to work with you. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Maura. Thanks.
Always fun. Yeah,
Take
thanks for pulling
care.
this together.
Bye, everyone.
Be
Take care.
well.
Bye-bye.